Hi, and welcome to the Bookkeepers Podcast. I'm Zoe Whitman. I'm in South Wales with Jo Wood. She's actually here in real life, and we're together because this week we are running our Bookkeepers Retreat, which is our first ever in-person event. I don't know how we're doing this, Jo. It's actually happening.
I know, it's mad, isn't it? We've been waiting so long, and it's finally here.
So we're getting ready for that. That's all happening tomorrow. And we've got 25 bookkeepers coming over to South Wales to spend a day with us on business development. And we're going to get to know each other. We're going to have that real community feel. I absolutely can't wait.
Yeah.
But before that all happens, we're joined today by Celso Pinto from Pixie. And what we really want us to do is have a chat about the sense of overwhelm that we know a lot of bookkeepers feel as they start practices. And I suppose as you're bringing lots of clients in with different deadlines and different priorities, it can feel like quite difficult to feel organized and in control of what's happening. So Celso, it's really nice to meet you. How are you doing?
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, really, really well. It's a week of holidays, so yeah, just making the most of it, I guess.
Well, thanks so much for taking some time out of your holiday to have a chat with us. I actually did a Pixie demo yesterday because a lot of bookkeepers who are working with us on our courses are using Pixie in their practices right now, and I haven't seen it myself, so I had a look. So I wanted to have a look around and had a really interesting demo with Matt, and he made sure I knew everything that I needed to know about it. So I think, and from my point of view, it's a good tool for somebody who wants to start to get control of their practice. What I suppose the first point really is this sort of sense of overwhelm. What can bookkeepers do right now if they're feeling that they don't know where to start with their business? How can they get control of it?
Of course. I guess that the first step is always to try to understand what's causing all that anxiety. And often that kind of relates to the business growing. And as things, just start expanding and you bring more and more and more clients, it's super normal to feel that things are kind of like getting out of control. Mm-hmm. And when that's the case, there are a few solutions. Obviously, the first thing that I'd recommend to anyone really is to join a support group. So that's kind of like that network of peers who went through the same challenges or who are going through the same challenges. And just, everyone has their ways of coping and some tricks to overcome those challenges. So that would be step number one. Step number two is if indeed the cause is around just feeling a bit more organized, then just looking at available systems to try to improve that. Some of those systems quite often just tend to fall into the scope of processes. And once you have those processes lined up, I would say, then maybe looking to systems, IT systems like Pixie to help implement what the ideal processes would look like. So in a nutshell, there are like many, many layers that I would recommend going through before actually getting to the software itself.
That's interesting. And I think one of the things we talk about a lot is starting out, because it's not just client work, is it? It's like everything around running a practice. So it's kind of separating that work of working on the business and then the client work, looking at that separately. We always talk about having an urgent and important grid and just prioritizing the stuff that is important, going to move your business forward. And of course, putting the urgent stuff at the beginning of that list and then looking at what you can delegate and outsource and maybe just take off the list. But then in terms of your actual workload, in an ideal world, how would you recommend bookkeepers approach managing their workload?
Your framework is really good, by the way. If it's anything like the Eisenhower decision framework, I think that's a really good way to start today, if I'm honest, just to prioritize things around. And then there's another thing that can be useful as well, which is another framework called the 4Ds of, I can't remember the name of it. But in any case, the 4Ds are essentially things that you need to do, things that you need to delegate, things you need to delay and just postpone to some other time, or if something doesn't need to get done at all, just delete it. So it's a very simple framework just to kind of get some order into the day. Personally, I try to follow these principles, and they're just really, really, for this of productivity, I just remembered, and it's a really, really good framework to kind of like get the day organized a bit more, I'd say, and it also gives us the that first win as we start in the morning, right? Because the first thing isn't really to deliver some work for a client or anything of the sort. It's really to just get the day organized, and that's really easy to do as well. So nothing like starting the day with a positive step.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, how I've always approached system, like I've been in business for many, many years. And in the past, it used to be that we would start out with a big roll of paper and Post-it notes and kind of map out what a system looked like. And then we would do Word documents and like link all the Word documents together. And it was so clunky. And what was so bad about it is that you had never had sight on where anyone was. Mm-hmm. And I think it's okay if you're the only person in your business, then but like you said, one of the D's is delegation. We can't do absolutely everything if we're going to be successful. Mm-hmm. There's too much to do. So I think really what's great about having something systemized is that you can delegate a section, but I don't like abdication of everything, like passing it over without knowing what it is. I think you need to understand what it is you want done and then delegate it. And it doesn't have to be to an employee. You can outsource to subcontractors. But I think that's what stops people growing their business, is because they don't know what the system is. They just do it. Mm-hmm. And actually, one of the biggest things we find with bookkeepers is that they don't spend that time on just breaking down what tasks they're doing. And I think something like Pixie can really help you, can't it, to see it in front of you rather than just doing it in your head.
Yeah, totally. And it's so interesting you mentioned the Word documents, because it's a very common pattern as well. And in fact, one of our latest innovations just, goes right to the heart of that. But anyways, so I'd say that the biggest benefit around Pixie is the fact that instead of having all these manuals in separate Word documents, you can standardize all of those things into Pixie workflow templates. And what that means is that you can even be exactly as you described. If you want to outsource a piece of work to someone or a few tasks in the process to someone, you can also take advantage of apps like Loom and record the video and embed those videos into the Pixie workflow, so that whomever is executing that can follow the video along. Even if it's the first time that they're doing that task, it doesn't really matter, because they can go through the process with you of how to achieve this and how to get this completed. From the business owner's perspective, I'd say that's almost like heaven, isn't it? We do it once, we record it to document the process, and then that's in the system where the tasks get executed. So this is a really important factor to guarantee consistency of delivery, which is about the most important thing, right next to efficiency in terms of professional services firms such as a bookkeeping service.
When would you say then, I feel like I know what the answer to this is, when do you think people need to bring practice management software into their business then? Because actually what you just said about standardizing a task, actually, whether we've got staff or not, we probably need to think about standardizing every step of our process, even to get ready to outsource that to a member of our team. And Jo's mentioned the idea of actually having this sort of top level view of what's going on in your business. It's really hard when you're holding that information in your head. Do you think that everybody should be bringing some kind of, not necessarily Pixie, like maybe something else, maybe some other project management tool? Do you think there's everyone should be thinking about this from day one of starting the business?
It's certainly helpful. I would say that, yes, think about it from day one, but don't let you stop you from actually getting the thing done. I see lots of those cases as well, where folks just get, analysis paralysis, and they just try to do so much and get all the processes in place before they actually get to do the thing. And just get something started. And the interesting part about doing, instead of planning first, is that it allows you to surface the patterns and which parts are actual components of the process and which aren't, and which parts do you want to keep track of and which don't you. So by doing, eventually you will indeed just surface the parts that need to go into that. So in a nutshell, to answer to your question directly, obviously as soon as possible, but not sooner, not so early that it really prevents you from getting things done. And it's very, very easy for folks to feel overwhelmed with setting up a system and just let that distract or become a distraction and become a project in itself. And I'm really I lean towards simplicity. And if there's anything that folks can just start doing without having a system in place, go there first, and then try to move towards a system like task management system like Pixie or not. First do and then systemize.
Where are you? Where do you stand on whether you do bring this software in yourself as the owner of the business versus delegating it to somebody who a lot of bookkeepers in our group have a VA or somebody doing administrative tasks. Should they do it themselves? Should they use somebody else? Or what kind of person should they be looking for to help them with this organization?
Yeah. It's tough. It depends on the culture that you want to create in the business. Obviously, if it's the business owner doing that, typically their own personality goes into the processes and goes into the culture of the firm. And I think that's a really, really important aspect. If obviously, folks get stuck in the doing and they actually need some help to just identify the processes, then getting some external assistance is definitely a good thing, just at least to get the ball going. Now that said, I would always say that anything related to client communications, it's always good to have the owner just live a bit of personality in those communications and just saying, this is how we want to write to clients and things like that. Some folks are very formal, others are very informal. I'm super informal as well. But again, that just goes into the Pixie brand a little bit. And that's just something that we always try to suggest to folks as well. Anything related to client service, make sure that the owner lives a bit of personality in those emails.
And the thing is, I mean, what I find is, I sometimes get stuck with, oh my goodness, I've got this system to write. What I delegate is the accountability. So I say to my VA, I've got this job to do. I'm not going to get it done without someone doing it. So I actually book her in to sit and be with me for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then she will support me, but it's my ideas.
Yeah.
So you can outsource that accountability. And I think that's really helpful. And I do it a lot. When there's something like an awards entry or something that I know I should do, but there's always something else. Or now for me, it's weekly email management. We got it down to 10 minutes a week, but it's booked in every week. We go through the inbox and because I know I've got that meeting coming up, I actually have got more into the habit, which is what I try and do with my clients with their paperwork. But I'm kind of putting that back on myself. So we don't have to actually delegate the thinking. We might need to delegate the accountability of the task.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's a really good point. And it becomes this forcing function to actually think about what needs to get done, doesn't it? Because you know that thing's coming. And as such, you just take a bit of time to prepare for that as well. So I think that's really beneficial.
From a practical point of view, Jo, I hope you don't mind me asking, I'm just thinking about how you've gone about systemizing your practice then. What would be, so you book some time in with your VA and then you're on a call and you're like, right, I've got this new client process that I need to document. What are the steps you go through to make sure that you haven't missed anything out in doing that? And how do you bring that into your project management system?
So what we tend to do actually is we do it as a whole team. And I still do like a bit of the post-it note, like just because I think of things and I'll write things down and then I'm like, actually that needs to come before that. And then what we need to do, so when we've actually come together with a process and all of us kind of sense check it, next what needs to happen is you need to try and use the process. And so then I need to make sure that I'm doing it. And then we set a meeting for after the next time I'm going to use it to review. And then I say, that worked really well. That was in the wrong place. And we've forgotten this. It came into my brain when we was on the meeting. So it's about realizing that this process is never done. It's never a finished thing. It's always going to need a little bit of adjustment. And but I love the fact that you can implement the Loom videos. I think videos are amazing use of our time. My husband's actually just created a whole list of payroll videos because he got really poorly last month, and he got poorly at month end. Yeah. And we realized that he had to do like all of these payrolls, and we're like, right, this month, record the process. So but again, when we actually try and implement, so first of all, you have to implement your own system and realize there's bits. Then you have to pass it on to someone else and let them do it. And then they're going to come back with things that you do automatically that they didn't know to do.
Yeah.
So it's constant work in progress.
Yeah. And it's this is where a system like Pixie comes really in handy, because iterating on what already exists is really easy, and make sure that the next time around you can take advantages of those improvements and make sure that those get baked into the process as well. Again, it's just a small thing, but at the end of the day, just having a system where you can put that and make sure that it's always followed is really, really important. And it's in your face at the end of the day, isn't it? As you're executing the task, here are the instructions now to achieve this. Here's the wording that we want to use to email the client, so on and so forth. So you really can't escape. And at the same time, it gives you that ability to build on top of it and continuously iterate on the on those processes and incorporate the feedback both from clients as well as the staff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like loads, and I think there are probably people who are watching this are thinking, okay, I've got to systemize my process and I need some workflows, and oh my god, this just sounds like a load of extra work. But it is really important, because there's no way that you can scale unless you have brought these processes in. And I think, like you said, we have to learn that it's a mindset thing. It's like every time we do something that is repeated in the business, okay, then we need to make sure that this is documented so we can potentially delegate it to somebody else, or it can be people know what to expect from us. Yeah. It always is the same when people interact with us. It just helps us to be better with our clients and better in our business.
And it's so interesting, because in the past, I remember being so precious over everything in my business and feeling that if I didn't do it, then my clients would be upset. But really, that was my ego talking, because what my clients want is they wanted to have the service delivered in a nice way. And actually, when you get the processes right and you weave your brand and how you talk to your clients through everything, really doesn't matter who is doing it if they're following the system. And so I was really precious. And you do think, oh my goodness, and I remember saying things like this, oh my goodness, that client would not want anyone else doing it. I don't do any of that kind of stuff anymore. And actually, and when I've been ill and stuff, actually what's happened is if my sister steps in and does a management accounts meeting, afterwards my clients message me and say, oh my God, your sister had so many great ideas. And I'm like, actually, we have to realize that actually we can, if it's the process and how we want to serve our clients is what they want. They don't want us to necessarily deliver it. And we can work 24/7 and do everything in our business. And if that's what you really want to do, you can. But for me, I want my business to be a tool for me to have more family time, more time to do what I want to do. So you have to get out of your own way and get these things out of your head and into a system.
Yeah, I agree. It's so interesting you mentioned that, because ultimately what we're talking about is standards of quality, isn't it? And by defining what the processes look like, essentially you're defining what the standard of quality is. And you want to make sure that it's always met, regardless of who's actually doing the delivery of the service to the client. And without having that documented very clearly, it just becomes really hard for people to know what the expectations are. So typically that happens, well, in the past year, it might have been a bit more challenging because everyone's working remotely, but typically it would happen by osmosis, by everyone being in the same office and then just picking up best practices from someone else. And right now, with everyone working in a distributed manner, it just becomes really important to document those things and say very clearly, this is what the expectation is. This is how we should communicate to the client. These are the things that we should be doing. These are the things we should not be doing, so on and so forth. And that's really, really helpful. And at the same time, Another thing that I was understanding from the comments earlier is that having something documented and having a system, ultimately, it allows you to stay organized and feel organized, which is perhaps the most important part, isn't it? Because without feeling organized, we just stay awake all night thinking, oh my God, I can't forget about doing this, or I feel overwhelmed with so many things going on at this moment. Why is that? Because there's too many things in the air. But if it's in the system somewhere, at least you can, just lean back a bit, take a breath, and think, at least I know exactly what needs to be done. Now let me just prioritize it and decide what to do with it, which is where the decision frameworks come into play. So again, there are so many advantages to having a system. Doesn't matter which system it is. And it doesn't really matter how small a business it is either. As long as you feel that you're in control as a business owner, that's perhaps the most important part to take the next step, whether that is growing the business, taking more staff, taking more clients, and so on and so forth. I'd say that's, again, one important consideration to have.
And actually having a bit of time, maybe if you're feeling overwhelmed today and you're watching this and you are thinking, actually, I have no idea, and I'm waking up in the night worrying I'm going to miss a deadline for something, maybe taking an hour out, although it might not feel like the best productive use of your time, actually having an hour to sit down and go, okay, what are my deadlines right now? What needs to be done? And then that's going to give you the shape of what your workflow needs to look like, so that you've got it all down on paper. It's somewhere. If you've got a team, everyone can see it. But even if it's you working on your own, you at least know where you stand. And I know I used to set up recurring appointments in my diary for a few days before a deadline to make sure that I had time blocked in the diary to work on something or review something that needed to go out, just so that I had the peace of mind that it was there. But actually, if you've got a tool that can help you manage that, that can work as well equally. What about, I think one of the big things that's a problem is when you take a new client on and there's catch-up work that you need to do, and you're like, okay, this is going to take me like 2 or 3 days to sort this mess out. And at the same time, I've got my other clients and they've got their recurring like routine work that needs to be done. When you bring those kind of clients into the business, it can suddenly feel like I was just about managing with my like monthly task, and now boom, I've got this extra heap of work. When am I ever going to fit this into my business? How can you, like, practically, how can you approach that and make sure that everything still gets done without dropping any of the balls?
Yeah.
I think onboarding is the biggest process, and the most for me, it has been the thing that I didn't used to focus on. I used to focus on selling, and I used to focus on the monthly tasks and making sure that that was done. But exactly what you've said, when you've got a client where you've got backlog work, now I focus. So if I take on a client that I've got backlog work, we meet every week until we are in the present day. And my onboarding process, now that I've got that down to a T, and it means that I've communicated exactly how we're going to work, exactly what I expect, my expectations from the clients, and what they can expect from me and my team. We set up all the communication channels. We get all of the references. We get the accountant's clearance. We get everything done. And we focus so much time on that bit that it's really changed my whole business, because the monthly tasks are easier. And the client is like, I use it like as a client training session. Like, this is how I make you into a good client. It's something that I learned, that, bad clients are created. And I had to start saying, this is my fault. They're a bad client, but I have been the problem. And I flipped that on the head. How can I make and nurture and harvest amazing best clients? And it is by upping that communication, but also that onboarding process. I literally have tick, 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 tick that I have to do to make sure that that they're done. And actually, for me, I think there's 5 people that are included in that onboarding. So we've got the accountant, the payroll, the VA, the bookkeeper, and client manager. They're all involved in that onboarding, and we all have things to do. And there's actually loads to do. And I think that's where the overwhelm comes from. There's so many tiny little tasks. There's setting up the software and talking to this person and that person. and getting that information from the client. We cannot do the work without that information. So I think my advice would be, if you can really nail your onboarding, for me, what it meant is my marketing and my sales became better, because I knew when they came on to become a client, they were going to experience the best thing and also stay and be a good client.
Love that. Love it. And how can something like Pixie help us with this process? Is there, if you're coming at this and you're like, okay, I need a process, and I think I know what my workflows are because I've got my Post-it notes out and I stuck them on a piece of wallpaper like Jo did. But am I missing something? Like, because that's the thing. And for a lot of our bookkeepers who are new, they haven't worked in practice, but they technically can absolutely do what they need to do. Perhaps they need to believe in themselves a bit more. But these kind of workflows are the things where it's hard to know if you haven't come across it before. You've talked about workflows that you have in Pixie. How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a huge component to standardizing the client onboarding in Pixie. Out of the box, the platform already brings a workflow specifically to tackle that, just to make sure that a few more things are taken into account other than simply, creating the client record here and getting these things signed off. As we were just discussing, there's a lot more to onboarding clients than just getting the information from them. And there are things that we need to do on the back office, and there are checks that you need to perform. There are accounts to be created in all different systems, so on and so forth. So it's important to make sure that all of that goes into the workflows. And in Pixie, it's really, really easy to start adopting that. So if you already have the workflow laid out on Post-it notes, for example, then the next easiest step is to replicate exactly that, no more, no less, into Pixie workflows, into the onboarding workflow. And this guarantees that whenever you're onboarding, not just individually as a team, as you're onboarding a new client, all the steps that were in the Post-its are now in the system. And there are deadlines to each of those things anyways. So it's very easy to make sure that the ball keeps progressing. And we collect all the information that you need to collect from the client. And if for some reason there's this client that needs something more specific, then you can bake that into the process so that the next time around, that improvement is already in the system as well. And again, having that not on a Post-it note, but rather on the system that's used throughout the firm by everyone in the team, again, it just reinforces the case for standardizing processes and that continuous improvement in terms of the services that are delivered to the client. And I totally agree that it's really, really important to make sure that clients all have the same experience as they come on board. It also guarantees that as they finish that onboarding process, every client kind of has the same setup. So everyone has the same folders, everyone has the same systems, all of those things are no longer unknowns. And then the recurring work becomes a lot easier as well, because there aren't going to be any surprises, I'd say.
No, I agree. And just taking that time out right at the beginning to say, okay, right, I'm onboarding someone right now, and maybe it's your first client, or maybe you've been running your practice for years and this is your next client. You're, right, okay, how do I really want this to look? And how can I standardize this? And what would be the best way for me to do this in my business? It can change. Like, you can change your mind later, decide you need to, but something, and be aware that actually, if I get this right, it's going to be something I can replicate, and that's going to make my life easier and anyone who comes into my business. Amazing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And another good thing as well is that you can learn from peers, isn't it? Again, I'm going to focus on Pixie, but it doesn't need necessarily to be Pixie. But if someone's in a peer group and that peer group is using Pixie and they have like this really streamlined onboarding process, it's really easy to share that template, those workflows with everyone else, so that everyone kind of like ups the game a tiny bit and just keeps improving and building on everyone else's experiences. Especially for someone getting started, this is really, really valuable, because you might not yet know. It's kind of like that going back to the frameworks, the unknown unknowns. you don't know what you don't know. So as you're trying to figure out things, people who are more experienced might have some perspective already on certain things and how to make those more streamlined. So just being able to leverage that on the earliest days just address a lot of the headaches down the line.
Yeah, we did this actually recently with our mastermind group. We found that 3 or 4 of the people in our group were all using Pixie. So we decided that we'd have a session together to look at like best practice. And I think that, learning from other people who are doing something similar to you, who may or may not have come across what you need help with right now, and you'll know something that they need to know, it's really helpful to collaborate, isn't
Collaboration is so important. And I think that's what's been missing in this industry for years. And this is why we have our group, because this is what I was missing 20 years ago when I set up in practice. And it's a lonely world. And actually, there's so much work out there and we can all help each other. And definitely like just getting together with a few of your peers and saying, what's your onboarding process? What do you do? And how can, and just picking up ideas. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
This has been so incredibly helpful for everybody. I wonder whether you could let us know, Nikki's just popped in earlier actually that she's in a trial month. She's had a demo. She's got the free trial. I wonder if you can let us know how people can find out more about Pixie and how they can have a free trial or get a demo if they want to do that.
Yeah, totally. So just head out to usepixie.com and start the free trial. The free trial lasts for 30 days. Generally, it's plenty of time to understand how the system works. And then you can also have a look into the Pixie Academy, which is something that is accessible inside the app. And this will allow you to join a session or a number of sessions just to understand how certain parts of the platform work. In addition to that, there's also content on the website itself, alongside with the workflow library, where you can pick up the best practices from all sorts of folks, and also the Small Firms Hub. And again, this is just a learning area of Pixie, where there's plenty of content explaining multiple things around the different stages of the journey of running a practice and running and growing a practice. So ultimately, go to usepixie.com. That's the starting point, and then you can either start a trial or start leveraging the content that we have available there.
Fantastic. And somebody has just said that they've booked a walkthrough. So,
there you go.
Amazing.
Well done, you.
Lovely. Well, look, if you want to find out more about what we do as well, come and join us in the Six Figure Bookkeepers Club. It's our free Facebook community. We've got about 2,500 bookkeepers in that group who are starting and building their own practices. We'd love to see you there. Get to know us a bit better. You might be able to come to our next Bookkeepers Retreat. It's our real life event that's happening tomorrow. And we're obviously quite excited about that. But for now, look, Celso, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been really interesting to learn from you. And I think that, the overwhelm is real. This is a challenge that comes up so much for our community, and hopefully for anyone who's listened, you've been able to take away some really good pointers for today. But for now, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week for the next podcast. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.